Hey, welcome back to KP Unpacked. This is where the biggest ideas in AEC, AI, and innovation collide. It's powered by KP Reddy Co, and this podcast breaks down the trends, the technology, the discussions, and the strategies that are shaping the built environment and beyond. This is the AI in AEC version of the KP Unpacked podcast. My name is Jeff Echols. I head up our mastermind program. I head up our startup incubator here at KP Reddy Co. And I am joined, as always, for this version of the podcast by my friend and colleague, Frank Lazaro. Frank is one of the heads of our advisory program here at KP Reddy Co. And he is our in-house AI expert. So it's always fun to be joined by Frank and to dig into these topics. I get to learn. And you get to learn, and we focus on giving you actionable takeaways from what it is that we talk about. So, Frank, welcome. I'm glad you're here, and I'm getting ready to dig into another topic here with you.
Another exciting topic. Yeah, it was. I know that we were talking back in the green room earlier, but it's interesting as being out in the wild and having listeners come up to me and start talking about our current first couple episodes, and it's amazing just the positive feedback that we're getting. So thank you for all those that are listening. But and Jeff is probably going to say this a dozen more times before we get off. If you have topics or ideas that you want us to kind of dive into, leave a comment, let us know, shoot us a note. We're happy to kind of talk about it. So yeah, looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said earlier, I mean, this is the purpose of this. And we talked about this as we were, kind of iterating on what this podcast could and should be. And there's plenty of discussion out there. There's plenty of podcasts out there. And this is not a knock on any of them, but there's plenty of them out there that talk about AI and emerging technology, different tools, et cetera, from the 30,000 foot view. Here's this, here's that, here's the other. Very few of them focus specifically on the AEC, the architecture, engineering, construction world, built environment, and even fewer, if any, focus on something that's actionable. Hey, here's what we're going to talk about today. And at the end of this, we're going to give you the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you need to go do in your firm this week. And so I
think that's a great point. I think that's an excellent point, because the feedback that I get and what we hear from, the listeners and the people that I interact with is that they love the practical nature. Like, you guys dive deep on one topic, you're giving examples. And I think that's the purpose. And I think that's the value in this is like, there's no reason for me to tell you that AI is important. I think we all know that, right? It's all going to impact us in some way. I think the practical nature and what we do here in 20 minutes, I think, is more valuable than what most people are doing when they sit into a workshop all day.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And with all of that in mind, again, it really doesn't matter if we spend 20 minutes or half an hour, whatever the time is on this episode, talking about something that you're not able to do something with it. So back to Frank's point a minute ago, if you have something that you want to know about, if you have something you want us to dig into, let us know so that we know exactly, right? If you tell us, hey, this is what we want, then we can talk about that and we can make sure that it's a valuable content. It's a valuable podcast for you. So probably the easiest way to do that is to jump over to our YouTube channel. It's KP Reddy, the letter K, the letter P, Reddy, REDDY. And just drop a comment below the video there on YouTube. Again, that's probably the easiest way. Of course, you can consume this in all kinds of different formats: the YouTube Shorts, the long form, the podcast version, Apple, Spotify, whatever, right? Which is also the beauty of technology. But to leave us a comment and let us know what it is that you want to hear us talk about, just go over there to YouTube and drop the comment there, and we'll be sure to pick it up. Our production team will be keeping a lookout, and anything that we talk about that needs a link, go to the show notes. Our production team is also dropping links to the things that we're discussing into the show notes. So you don't have to worry about
Mhm.
taking notes or anything like that. Just go to the show notes, find the link, and go check it out. All right, Frank, let's get into it. Our topic today is AI training, getting your team
Mm.
up to speed. Um, in one sense, I do absolutely believe that everybody on your team has a responsibility to learn some of this stuff on their own, right? It's here
Yeah.
we are. We talk about this emerging technology, and we talk about AI this, and these futuristic things. We talked about using the internet. We talked about using web browsers in the same way. I don't know, 15, 20 more years ago. I'm got to do the math real quickly in my head.
Stop, you're
It,
gonna make me feel old.
it's too late. You
That's
got
right.
up this morning. I
Uh,
know how it goes. um, but so I think there's some responsibility, right? This is it.
yep.
It's not even the future. It's here. So we have some responsibility to learn some of these things on our own.
Mhm.
However, right, we're all about building teams and supporting teams and
Mhm.
improving teams. So we may need to train our teams on some things.
Yeah.
So where do we start?
So it's interesting. There's really kind of like there's two things that I always bring up when either I'm giving a presentation or talking with a client. And one is kind of just to make a point. We have no problem with sending a project manager to a PM boot camp and
Hmm.
spending thousands of dollars and them away from the office for 2 or 3 days. Then my immediate next question is how much money have you identified for AI training? And inevitably it's 0. They haven't
Hmm.
really kind of thought about that. And my point to that is just giving somebody the tool is not going to make them more efficient. In all honesty, I think what you're going to find is that they'll waste more time trying to figure out how to do it than they will if they got training. So for me, for me, it's like a cornerstone. I kind of started my consulting career with giving AI training. So I have a lot of passion around that. But I think the real issue that we have here is that we're giving people these tools with the expectations that they're going to kind of figure it out. And then we worry about data security, we worry about, client information. Okay, great. Maybe if you train them on those things, they would actually use the tool more effectively.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really great point, right? There's the tool. There's the
Mhm.
tool itself. Can they learn how to use chat? Can they learn how to use Claude? Or
Right.
we know a lot of people are using Copilot and other tools. Sure,
Yeah.
sure. They can learn. They can improve their skills. They can get better at writing prompts, etc. But those things that you just mentioned, the data security and privacy and things like that,
Yeah.
that may not be the things that pop up on their radar. So there's that aspect of it, which is critically important. And we had a session for our mastermind members um, probably a month and a half ago now, all about AI policies for your firm.
Yeah.
And we actually talked about that on the podcast as well, an
Yeah.
episode or two ago. And it's really important, right? Because clients are asking, "What about my data?" Right? These
Yeah.
types of things are coming up. So we need to make sure people are using the tools properly, just
Mhm.
like anybody
Yeah.
else that uses a tool. And I think your point about efficiency, right? Can they learn it? Yes.
Yeah.
Can they learn it quickly? We don't know. And it
Yeah.
reminds me that you have your book, Finding 12 Minutes.
Yeah.
So if you want, go over to Amazon and look up Frank Lazaro, or look up Finding 12 Minutes, Unlocking Efficiency with Generative AI. And that's one of the things that we talked a lot about when we first launched this podcast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why don't you recap that really quickly? Because I think it ties to this idea of training pretty powerfully as well.
Mhm. Yeah. So the whole concept is if you think about breaking down the concept of using generative AI from you know, a productivity and efficiencies perspective, that if you go with the small goal of saying, I want to save 12 minutes per day using generative AI. And when I say generative AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, pick your tool of choice. You'll end up saving about an hour per week. And then if you kind of build that out throughout the whole year, what you'll find is that you're saving more than 40 hours per year per person in your firm. So the one big metric, we all know this, is that every firm focuses on utilization. So if you're looking for found hours, you're looking to try to improve efficiencies and productivity to get people to do more billable work, you know, using an AI note taker to save 5 minutes per meeting, using your Copilot or Gemini to kind of help respond back to an email or capture meeting notes or do any of those things. And you can save those small pockets of time collectively over the year. What you find is that you gain those efficiencies and productivities. For example, a 200 person firm can generate an additional almost 10,500 hours a year. That's the equivalent to almost 5 full-time employees worth of hours. And that's just getting everyone to do 12 minutes per day. So I think it's the baseline, right? I think that's the bare minimum. If you save 5 minutes, you're in 3 meetings, you're already at 15 minutes. I use it consistently throughout the day. And I probably save about an hour or more per day, right? So I'm able to do more. I'm able to time shift. Like we all have things to do during the day, sometimes a doctor or whatever. But I can make that up using generative AI.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we know that many AEC professionals, and of course, this is not unique to the AEC world, but we know that many struggle with the adoption
Mhm.
of AI and different AI tools. So, what are some of the common issues that you see as you're going around and doing some of these trainings and doing some of these
Yep.
workshops? What are some of the common issues out there?
So right off the bat, when you think about it, right, every firm, immediately ran out and created an AI policy. Okay, great. Did you train people on that policy? Right. So when it's funny, when you think about AI training, everyone thinks about training on how to use the tool. And yes, absolutely. Yes, you need to train people on how to use the tool, but you also have to train them on the things that you care about. Like, how
Mm,
do you use client data? How do we do this? What is our data security? So, training goes beyond just saying, I need to learn to prompt. Sometimes it's like, yes, that's probably one pillar of several that your AI training should cover. So I think some of the problems or the things that you see out there is that one is that firms rushed out, created these AI policies, and never really trained people on what the policy is or the real problem is. The second part of that, and I think it's probably as equally as problematic, is the fact that now that you haven't trained them on the policy, you're also just giving them a tool and they don't know how to use it. And so what you see is that it's the lack of adoption. Like, oh yeah, we have all these AI tools and no one's using them.
mhm.
Okay, but what did you do from a training perspective? What was the cadence around that? Again, you think about all other aspects of our business, we have training regiments that already in place, right? We don't make somebody a project manager without actually giving them the PM training. We need to be thinking about that same way when it comes to AI.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just even though we're
Mm.
we're getting into a point in time where um, those coming up into leadership, maybe not top level leadership yet, although they're close, even
Yeah.
though they're digital natives, um, different than you or I. But even though they're digital natives,
We're
it's not a
digital ancestors.
this is we are that. It's not a guarantee, right? It's not
Mhm.
something that they're just uh, going to necessarily or automatically be born understanding how to use these things. So we know that there are
Yeah.
different aspects to training. So when you're thinking
Mhm.
about training, how do you go through, or what are the steps that you use
Mhm.
maybe when you're
Yeah.
talking about going through AI training and
Yeah.
adoption?
So interesting. I want to touch on one thing because you just triggered a thought there, right? We go back to this concept of you would train someone how to use Autodesk or Revit. Very rarely do they have Autodesk or Revit for personal use. They're not using Autodesk at home to do
Hmm.
something. Really different with AI. So some of their learned behavior and some of their training is because they're personally using it
Hmm.
and they're doing things and they're trying things. That doesn't necessarily translate into how you want them to use it from a business perspective, right?
Right.
they're planning trips, they're doing things, they're making funny videos, they're making funny images, all from a personal perspective. So this one particular tool in this particular instance, there's that gray area between I use it for my personal stuff and I kind of know how to use it, and they take that same behavior and they try to do it on the business side, but it may not fit the AI policy. It may not get the results that they want. So some of the areas that you think about when, at least when I think about this, is that yes, you need to go send your people out that get AI training. Does that mean you send everyone? No. There's the concept of train the trainer. Send one or two people to get trained up and then have them come back to your organization to train everyone else. There's a ton of free resources out there as well. Not necessarily geared towards, say, AEC specifically, but there are a bunch of trainers out there that are doing stuff for our industry. So you have to think, and again, pick your association, pick your 3 or 4 letter acronym. They're all kind of offering something along those lines. Heck, we even offer it, right? So it's one of those
Mhm.
things to where there are plenty of opportunities to do that, but it doesn't need to be daunting. It doesn't say, "Oh my god, I have 150 people in my organization. I have to send them all to this training now." You can do a train the trainer model. That's very effective for very big organizations. But you need to have those people. They need to be champions. They need to document the training, right? So use Loom or record a Zoom call. Do those things so you have it. So people, they're not going to learn it the first time you tell them that. They're going to have to go back and say, "Oh, what was Jeff saying in that training about that prompt? Let me go back." And then key around documentation, right? I love telling people, I'm like, if you find a prompt that works, save it, right?
Mhm.
Go back to it. I guess the other thing I should be telling them to do is to share it.
Yeah.
Share it with a colleague. Hey, this is how I'm using it. This is the way that I've gotten these results. And that would be pretty effective to really start kickstarting that with your organization.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice, certainly. Um, in the it's funny you were saying that, the alphabet soup, that's what I call the associations, right? The AIA, the ACEC, the PSMJ, the SMPS, the list goes on and on. Maybe
Yeah.
KPR Co is part of the alphabet soup. I'm not sure, but
We're getting close.
we are we're fully embedded, certainly. But you also made a point a minute ago that some of this training is not necessarily AEC specific, and I would say,
Mhm.
and I doubt that you'll disagree with this, but I would say that for the vast majority of what we're doing, and the topics that we're talking about in these sessions, I mean, we haven't talked about test fit or swap or any of these
Those are all
design,
specialty. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So many of these tools that we're talking about, Google Notebook LM and Chat
Mhm.
and Gemini, things you mentioned earlier, Claude and uh, Copilot, and those,
Yeah.
the training doesn't need to be AEC specific, right? These are
No, I
tools.
don't think it does, right? There was a phrase that I used in one of my trainings a long time ago, and I say a long time ago, it's like last year. The
Well,
the prompt
in AI years, that's like a
exactly.
century.
But the phrase was the prompt is the prompt. So the one thing that you have to know about these is that, and I love showing this side by side. I'll open up Copilot and open up ChatGPT and put the same exact prompt in both, and they'll operate right. So once you
Mhm.
learn how to use one, switching to ChatGPT or switching to Copilot or Claude or Gemini, they all operate and act the same way. So prompting is prompting. That doesn't really change anything. The specialized tools are something that's a little bit different, right? So the swap AIs, the Joyce of the world, the work orbs, those are generative AI tools, but those are very specialty tools, right? They're
Mhm.
doing something very specific to where we're creating construction documents. We're doing proposals. That's a different learning model, different learning
Right.
curve.
Right.
But when we think generally speaking from a prompting perspective, using any of the other tools, if you learn to use one, you could use any of the other ones, which I think that's fabulous in a lot of ways. But it is also one of those things to where just know that as you start adding in some of these unique tools, your training is going to have to be a little bit broader, right? It's just not about learning ChatGPT.
Yeah.
we're onboarding X tool, so therefore you also have to have training around that tool.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, right. And I think we know that, right? It's not
Yeah.
you're not gonna send your accounting team to get trained on AutoCAD or on Revit, nor are you going to send your design team or your
Mhm.
construction team to some nondescript, non-industry
Yeah.
association for training on AutoCAD or Revit, right? It's just
Right.
these are things that we know. It's sort of common
Yeah.
sense. So if I were to sum up the steps that you're talking about in terms
Mhm.
of training and adoption, you talked about sending a certain number of people to train the trainer, but sending them to something hands-on, or maybe even bringing somebody in-house to do the hands-on, the training, the live demos, and the workshops. And then you talked about documentation, so maybe creating playbooks, right? Okay, this is what we talked about. These are
Yep.
prompts. These are best
Mhm.
practices. And then
Mhm.
you talked about those AI champions, I think is what you call
Yeah.
them. They're the
Yeah.
people that are going to carry it in house. And hey, I've got a question. I need to go talk to Frank, or I needed to go talk
Yep.
to Jeff, because they're the ones that are our, I don't know, our in-house gurus, or whatever
Yeah.
whatever uh, title we're going to give them. They probably have to wear a sash or something like that, I imagine,
They
around
get
the
they get
office.
little they get little pins of honor. It's
Bling.
interesting. I've also been telling organizations and basically kind of doing what we try to do here at KP Reddy Co is that having those live demos and just those lunch and learn type opportunities to have people share the different things that they do. So I would encourage organizations, even from an ongoing learning perspective, maybe once a quarter, just have a 1 hour lunch and learn where people can come and say, hey, this is how I use this tool. Right.
Mhm.
And I think what you find, particularly with AEC firms, is that they like to see what other people are doing. They may not do it exactly like the way you're doing it, but it helps them kind of visualize, oh, I can see how this can be integrated into my workflow. I'm just going to have to do these couple steps differently. So the live demos and that lunch and learn environment where people can just kind of toot their own horn of like, hey, check what I've been doing about when it comes to generative AI could spur the thought and help someone else within the organization to learn. KP and I were actually at a client meeting, a workshop a couple weeks ago, and it was interesting. You had one department head saying, "Oh, we're doing all these things from an innovation AI perspective." Their counterpart was like, "Oh, we didn't know you were doing that." That's
Mhm.
when you talk about training, just being able to get her on a quarterly call to sit there and say, "Hey, these are the things I'm doing," probably would have got the other department head to go, "Okay, wait a minute, maybe we should be doing that." So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to once you kind of get the baseline training done to continue that training. I think honestly, I think it's a very continuous training model that most are going to have
It's
to
gotta
adopt.
be. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, it's gotta be. I mean, the tools are changing so quickly, new tools,
Oh,
being developed and everything else. It's gotta be continuous, right?
yeah.
Um, so I hear it. I hear what you're saying, right? If we go through this training, we do all the things that we've been talking about, it's gonna help us adopt
Mhm.
the AI faster, the AI tools faster, I should say,
Yep.
not the AI. I'm not talking about, the eventual Arnold Schwarzenegger, um, Skynet, Terminator kind of event. It's going to help us adopt AI tools faster. And I like what you said, right? The other department needs to know what we're doing.
Mhm.
That spreading that throughout the organization can reduce some of the resistance to change, because there are people we hear about this sometimes in our mastermind groups. Hey, the thing that's holding us back is people's resistance to change. As
Yep.
it turns out, human beings often resist change. So there's that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we touched on with the policies and everything else, we need the consistent use. We need
Yep.
a consistency in the time, a consistency in the way, a consistency in the way our um, uh, the data is handled, and
Mhm.
everything else. Because if you talk to your innovation team, they're going to tell you, hey, these clients are forcing us to fill out these documents about how we're using AI. So that if none of this is ringing a bell yet, talk to the people that are dealing with the
Yeah.
client facing side, and
Mhm.
ask them what questions and what requirements the clients are starting to push down
Yeah.
in terms of AI. So,
Yeah. And I think there's another pro in there too, is that I think that if you have a consistent training program in place, I think it's easier for leaders to kind of see the ROI and the investment. If I invested this much
yeah,
into this technology, this innovation, what am I really getting out of it? Well, I think the training helps fortify that, where
mhm.
now that people are trained and they're using it more effectively, you can then really start understanding and diagnosing where the return is on those investments. And by the way, some of this investment's not cheap, right? If you're building your
Mhm.
own AI solution, or even if you're buying ChatGPT subscriptions, right? It's just another subscription cost that's added onto
Yep.
all the other subscriptions that you have from Autodesk and Revit and et cetera, et cetera. So again, I think another pro here is that it helps with really defining and helping the leadership understand the return on the investment.
Yeah, and I think that also brings it back full circle to what you were talking about before. It's the title of your book, Finding the 12 Minutes,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
If we can implement this training system and we can get that consistency and all these things we've been talking about, then we start to leverage that 12 minutes per
Mhm.
person per
Yeah.
day, that starts creating or generating, I guess, that exponential math that you were talking about in terms of utilization rates and billable hours, and
Yeah.
eventually somebody will pull out their Casio solar calculator, and they will calculate the
Yeah.
ROI, unless
Yeah, no,
they're
no,
using
I
an
agree,
AI
but
tool.
again, yeah, but again, if you think about it from the perspective of why do we send people to a PM boot camp? Well,
Mhm.
we want them to be more effective project managers. We don't
Yep.
want them to make mistakes, right? Because we know that we just let them off on their own without the training, that they know that there's going to be mistakes in the project plan and how the project's being managed. We're going to lose money. AI is
Yeah.
the same exact way.
Yep. Yeah.
If they know how to
Absolutely.
do it and they know what they're doing, they'll be more effective, and then that's where you can get the ROI.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So we know, right, on the con side of this, we know
Mhm,
that it's going to take an investment of resources, time, effort,
mhm,
money, et cetera, budget. And we also know that the technology continues to change. And so it's going to, as you said, it's going to be an ongoing training. And we're going to
yep,
have to keep updating these playbooks that we mentioned before. We're going to have to keep
mhm,
keep on top of the training. We're going to have to
yeah,
have people, I picture it as a snowball or a rock or whatever at the top of the hill, right? At some
yeah,
point, we've got these champions, and they're latching onto the training. They're teaching. The trainers have been trained, right? They're starting to teach people. They're starting to document the prompts and all of those
yeah,
things. It's going to start rolling downhill, but it has to be continually updated. We have to stay on top of it. So
right,
there are pros and cons, but what are the key takeaways? What are the things? I'm listening to this right now? Maybe I'm the head of HR, and I'm in charge of training for my organization. Maybe I'm the CEO that's thinking, how do I get my people trained? How do I get them on board?
right,
What are the one or two or three key takeaways that someone listening to
mhm,
this HR director or CEO or whoever it is that's saying, okay, I understand now that I need to train my people.
mhm.
How do I do this? What's the key takeaway? What do I need to know going forward?
The one thing that we tell most organizations, like when we do our KP Reddy Co workshops, having a dedicated leader that's kind of focused on being able to see things across the organization is super helpful. Doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you don't have other inputs from other parts of the organization, but having someone that's really kind of being able to see broadly around that, it's key. The other thing too is you have to stop at the surface level activities that don't actually do anything. Just because you created the AI policy doesn't mean people are following it. Just because you gave them the tools doesn't mean that, right? That they know how to use it. So do all of those things, but have a coherent plan to sit there and say, yep, when new employees come on, they get trained on the policies, they get trained on AI. They get trained on how to use AI. They know how. So it's one of those things to where that you have to think about it from a more comprehensive perspective and not necessarily focus just on the surface level things. Again, having an AI policy does not necessarily mean people know how to use it. Giving people a tool doesn't mean know how to use it. So it's one of those things to where, um, make sure you have a more comprehensive plan, and it just don't do the small things and then think that it's being effective.
Yeah, 100%. As we've been going through this episode today and I'm listening to what you're saying, it strikes me that, again, I said this at the very beginning. I head up our mastermind program and I facilitate all of our mastermind meetings.
Mhm.
And so I sit in on a lot of meetings with people who have titles like innovation leader, chief innovation officer, director of innovation, head of construction technology, things like that. So I sit in on a lot of these conversations. And as you're saying this, I'm going, yes, you're exactly right. Because a lot of these people are that person that you're talking about, right? They're
Yeah.
in charge of the knowledge management or something like that, or someone on their team, depending on their level, someone on their team may be dedicated to that. And it may be that somebody's listening to this and they already have a robust training program. I know many firms do out there, and
Yeah.
then this is just a component they need to build into that training program. So,
Mhm.
but it's important and probably growing in importance quicker than many of the other different aspects of training that are important to AEC firms would be my guess.
Yeah, I think I think the industry is kind of caught off guard by AI a little bit. And so now we got to play those catch up, right? It's now that they see how pervasive it is and where it is and all these tools, I suspect that you're going to see more robust AI training at most organizations, particularly
Mhm.
when the big firms, the big software firms start introducing their AI tools. And obviously ChatGPTs are out there. So it's like, I think what you're going to find is that most firms that get ahead of this now are going to be very well suited for when some of these newer tools come out later.
Yeah. Yeah, and I understand. I've said this a few times, and it dawned on me as I was saying it is we
You
just
know,
lost Frank. When I talk about the your clients asking or having something that you have to fill out or something like that, and on how you're using AI,